Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another really live edition of Green Rush. That would be the industry's business cannabis talk show that we run every Friday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern here on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and I'm so happy to have a couple of guest hosts and a great guest already in the room with us. You know, a lot of times I have to fill for a few minutes until our guests arrive. This particular guest, however, was on time, ready to rock. And we have a great guest, and we have two great guest hosts. Doug Miller is with me, Josh Kincaid is with me, and most importantly, the CEO of Tilt Holdings, Gary Santo, is with us all. Gary, thank you so much for joining us here on Friday.
Pleasure to be here, Jimmy.
So when's the Safe Banking Act going to pass?
About 5 minutes. No, I think today getting the president to sign into law, the medical marijuana research bill, I think was a great first step. I think certainly the market reacted positively to that. But I feel like somewhere between now and the end of the lame duck session, they've painted themselves into a corner. I think Schumer coming out, ahead of the election, talking about we're going to get this done during lame duck. I think he was doing that with the assumption he would not have control of the Senate, and he actually retained control of the Senate. So if they don't get it done now, I don't know when they're going to get it done. I just hope they don't try to make it too perfect and just get something done and realize we can do this iteratively.
Yeah, got it. Hey, Josh and Doug, rather than me calling on you, if you want to jump in and ask any questions of Gary, please do, because as the head of an MSO in the United States of America, they get a lot of attention in the cannabis industry. Let's just say it, and I actually think that it's been worth it to have MSOs involved with a new industry, because strength is power. Money dictates a lot of things in politics and in Washington, D.C., and a new industry, a controversial industry like cannabis, has needed these MSOs to get us to where we are, where we actually had a president of the United States use the wrong word. He said marijuana instead of cannabis, but that's okay. We'll work on that, right? But I got to live to hear this, the president actually say that. I was like, oh my God, I almost died and went to heaven. Go ahead, Josh. I know you're always rocking, always ready to ask a question. Go ahead.
Well, I guess, Gary, I got to ask you, what's your sentiment on some of the debt right now? So we've seen both in Canada, top 6 MSOs owe 73 million in USD to the government, and same thing, top 10 MSOs in the US owe $500 million, $500 million. Is that a result? Wondering what your sentiment is, wondering what the result is. Is that high taxes? Is that just inability to pay? What's your take?
The amount you quoted for the U.S. MSOs, that's not the debt load they're carrying. That's the amount they owe in taxes, or
right?
Okay. I think what's interesting, you talk about having operators, talk about MSOs in general, and it's funny how many of these companies were started by folks who either did not build a team or had the skill set really to build an operating company. If you think about what cannabis companies are, this isn't like the tech boom where .com was a new concept to people, or crypto, which is probably a bad example to give right now, but where it's a new and different concept. This was taking 3 very complex industries that already existed: agriculture, specialty manufacturing, and specialty retail, and putting them all together. And then in the case of the US operators, having no consistency of the regulation. So all the things you would normally do when creating those companies in terms of centralizing and hub and spoke supply chain management, you couldn't do. So very complex for the seasoned professionals who would come out of those types of operations. So I think when people got into here, they didn't have the controls in place. It's not clear to me why folks weren't paying taxes on time. Other than the fact that in a number of cases, a lot of these companies, no matter how high their revenue base, they're still burning cash. They still haven't tipped over to the positive EBITDA side of things, which begs the question, where is your crossover point where you get to scale? We've been lucky at Tilt. I think we've had a second act. We went public in late 2018, early 2019, pretty much went through all the cash that was raised, the minimal cash that was raised through the reverse takeover, but really had to hit the reboot button. We had a board that was willing to let us do that and replace the management team and really started to bootstrap the company and learn to live on cash flow from operations. And since 2019, that's all we've lived on. So we pay our taxes, we pay our bills. Don't always pay them exactly on time when we should. Might be a little month late here, a month late there. But I think there it's just responsible growth. And when you look at how fast so many of these companies exploded and the deals they were doing, and think about 2019, there were deals being done all the time at outrageous valuations, cash flying all over the place. And then the assumption that they could always go back to the market and get some more. So I do think some of it speaks to the operating health or lack thereof in some of these companies.
Gary, you mentioned the markets. Doug Miller keeps an eye on those markets on an almost hourly basis. He's also with us. Doug, I did not check the ticker or check the markets today. So can you give us a little bit of what effect it might have had? And then you, of course, can ask Gary anything you want.
Sure. Tilray went up. Tilray was looking great actually today. I was actually looking at Tilt today, and you guys, the chart was definitely reversing up. So I was looking at being an investor real quick. So I know that one. A lot of them were curling off the bottom, which they just been dipping and dipping and dipping. And I don't like to take political sides, but the administration, yeah, they want to pass through things like you were just saying. They have the ball in their court right now, and they've just been stalling on everything that they've said that they were going to do, whether it's with cannabis or economically, anything. And so it just worries me when they do say, hey, you know, we're able to do this. Are they really going to do it? Because they haven't really put much forward towards anything yet. So it worries me about that.
I think though they might, because this would be the second election cycle where cannabis gets thrown out there right before the election. And if nothing happens while you still have control of the Senate, let alone the lame duck session, then you really have to start to question the motivations. Because when you have over 70% of the population agreeing on something, I mean, 51% is considered a landslide in a presidential election. To get 71% of Americans to agree on just about anything is pretty remarkable. So at one point, does the government that's supposed to be representative start representing the people they're down in Washington, there for? So I'm cautiously optimistic. I think at MJ Biz, I might have said about 75% chance. I'm going to stick to that. Might be a little bit higher, but I feel like this one, they're not going to be able. It might not look great. It might not be everything we all want, but it's a start. And it's going to take a while to implement. I mean, I came out of finance. I lived through Dodd-Frank and how long it took for that to be implemented. And it didn't change the financial industry overnight. But just the fact that it's starting will relieve, I think, a lot of pressure that we're seeing across the industry.
And I have to agree. I think they'll push one initiative through. And generally, with all the cannabis legislature, they write the laws, and then they seem to wait 3 years to pass things through, and they seem to just get very dated. And by the time, and I know I live in New Jersey, it's happened here multiple times. They'll write the regs and then wait a few years, and then they'll use them regs from 3 years ago, which are completely outdated, and they're not helping anybody. So I had, like you said, I agree, 75% chance. They're definitely going to try to take some kind of initiative to do something. The ball's been in their court for too long, and like you said, the popular vote is there. So, but are they going to screw it up? And that's what I want to say.
Go ahead, Gary. Do you think, again, my feeling is, this is cannabis time, right? Everything takes longer in this industry. It's like one step forward, two steps backward, right? I mean, we've all been there. We've certainly been documenting it and watching it all happen. Is it a strategy? Is it a conscious strategy of our government to start to slow the growth of the cannabis industry, Gary?
I don't know that anything the government does these days is conscious. It's not clear. It's the land of unintended consequences. And, I look at what's happening even in the state governments. Look at New York. They want to get it right so bad that they are going out of their way to get it wrong. And I think it's just one of those things where if you try to legislate perfection, right, it's taken us 100 years to screw up cannabis, right? Between the prohibition and the way the laws weren't being applied. Now you come a boomerang where now regulations aren't even being enforced in certain states. You think about New York and the bodegas and everything. While they're trying to then prop up all these social equity applicants and have them open legal businesses, while people are selling cannabis illegally in the state, and they won't prosecute against that. So they can't get out of their own way. I think what they really need to understand is to overcome 100 years of bad behavior, we're going to have to do this incrementally and start somewhere. And we're not going to get it right. We're going to start it. We're going to have to refine it. We're going to have to get better. And that's pretty much what every law has ever come about in the US. I don't know too many laws that got it out of the gates, the first time.
There's a happy medium there somewhere, because in Washington, we've got a Class C felony on maintaining and operating a cannabis lounge. It's been 7 years. So I just thought, like, oh yeah, you made a mistake, you're going to, redo that, or, overturn the law and change it. And eventually nothing happened. So there's got to be a happy medium there somewhere where eventually the changes can happen at a faster pace and we don't have to wait as long. But
I mean, I am concerned with 280E in the sense that if they fix it, the revenue goes down for the government. So what is their incentive to fix 280E right now? Suddenly we could actually have rational deductions, in terms of what we can pay taxes on. So I do sometimes wonder if there's some other pieces, which again, then don't fix. I want it fixed, don't get me wrong. But if that's your biggest worry, then do something there separately. But let's get reasonable access to banking. Let's start to get rational investing back in here. Let's get the ability for people. I mean, my own board members want to buy stock at times, and because they don't carry Canadian brokerage accounts, they struggle to go and buy the stocks because sometimes their own brokerage accounts won't let them buy off the OTC. So it's kind of a strange universe that we live in. I mean, you take all those things I talked about earlier, the difficulties associated with each of those individual industries that we've all moshed together, and then add to that, let's go trade on the nascent exchanges up in Canada, and let's see how it works out. So it's for those of us that make it through, I'll begin to think that we're like the cockroaches of the universe. You can't kill us. You can try, you cannot kill us. So what do you think? It's kind of fun to be here.
What do you think is going to be the one thing that's going to allow Tilt in order to trade independently of the news? I've been kind of taking a survey, asking a lot of CEOs, same question. I asked Morgan Paxia of Poseidon. He's got an ETF that he launched, and it's like, if you look at it, this isn't financial advice, but if you look at it, it looks like it would be fair value because it trades so low. Seems like cannabis stocks only trade with the news. They don't trade independently of their own financials. I'm not talking about just not even fundamentals, but even technicals. So what is it going to take in order for that breakout to occur?
I think we need to get the right investors married up. This is a high growth industry, right? It's an emerging high growth industry. It got out of the gates in a way that very few emerging industries, other than maybe .com, really did, right? You had all this money pouring in before people really knew what was going to be happening with that money, what growth was going to look like. And because you could not trade on the big boards and bring in the institutional investors, you ended up with a mismatch, right? You never want to use short-term money to finance long-term debt. Well, you have retail investors financing high growth. And a retail investor doesn't have a 3 to 5 year horizon, and they're not looking for companies to reinvest in themselves. They're looking in 12-month increments on what their return is. They're day trading. So I think part of it is getting the institutional investors into the space because they are the ones most likely to be the ones to take a look at the underlying fundamentals and say, okay, this makes sense. I understand why they're doing this at this point. It's not top line revenue growth at any cost. And I think that's the piece, the biggest piece that is really holding back companies from trading. So I watched a couple of earnings cycles now, and the last couple have been tough. But honestly, the dislocation was there even before. We saw companies putting up good numbers back in the beginning of the year and still trading down, which made no sense whatsoever. And the reason was, well, we thought that legalization was going to occur sooner and it didn't, or safe banking was going to happen and it didn't. And if that's the catalyst and putting up a good quarter isn't, then we've got to fix the investor base somehow.
And I can just say something. You were talking about the day trading, and there are so many cannabis companies that are in the penny stocks that they say, and a lot of them go under so fast, and a lot of them, I mean, till obviously you have a lot of things going on, you're legitimate. A lot of them have zero going on, and they are just pump and dump type stocks. And I think a lot of people kind of got burnt by a lot of the cannabis stocks, and I know a lot of people that have. And like I always tell people, you got to do your due diligence, and you really got to look into these companies and pay attention to what's going on, because they can go up and down so fast. But like you were saying, the day traders, I think as the market grows, and if they can get it federally legal with the banking institutions behind it, that's when you'll start to see the catalyst change between, hey, the state might go legal, so now all of a sudden all the cannabis stocks go up, as opposed to, like you said, my earnings were great, our company's good, our stock value should be going up, and a lot of them don't. They just move, like you said, Josh, with the news of the entire market, and it hurts the whole entire industry. It really does.
Yep.
So.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Hey, Gary, as a CEO of an MSO, you guys are great targets in this industry. Everybody knocks the MSOs. It's an easy thing. It's like the Yankees, what the Yankees used to be, and all the Boston sports teams are now. Okay, I covered my ass. I covered my
Good recovery. Good recovery.
But you guys are also recognizing the importance of giving those who have been most impacted by the failed war on drugs an opportunity to get into it, allowing funds and programs. And you guys are involved with the Shinnecock Indians in Long Island, aren't you, in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, when it comes to the duty of an MSO, if you're creating an emerging market, you got to think more broadly than just your own balance sheet and your own P&L sometimes, because, you can't be a standalone. And there's no real IP in cannabis, right? So I'm not going to create some molecule like you might in life sciences, which was my prior stop before here. And I'm going to own this particular molecule for the next 10 years and no one else can make it. So I'm all about me. You really can't be that in cannabis. I think we have to do a better job working together to create the ecosystem. And when it comes to those impacted in Shinnecock in specific, I think there were folks there. If we can't access money, or what we're able to access, right? Millions of dollars we spend, and the learning exercises we've had to go through building a company, well, then you turn to someone like the Shinnecock or any of the other social equity applicants out there who have even less access to capital, but all the same challenges the rest of us have. Just getting them a license isn't good enough anymore. I know it makes everybody feel good, and let's donate some money to the Last Prisoner Project, and those are all good and worthwhile exercises. But if all I'm going to do is hand a license to somebody in an incredibly complex market, and it's hard enough to start a business in the United States on top of that, and just throw them in the deep end of the pool with maybe a few dollars and say good luck, then I'm just creating a case study for why this failed and what we need to do differently. I think we have to be willing to take risk, and with the case of the Shinnecock, that's exactly what we're doing. We've agreed to fund up to $18 million to build out a facility. We know that right now there's a tremendous groundswell of support, and certainly the work the Shinnecock have done since probably 2015 in looking and researching and creating a cannabis program on their sovereign land, and suggest they're serious about it. They're not just trying to ride the green wave. They want to build a true economic engine. They don't have casinos out there in Southampton. So for them, this is that moment to create jobs, to create revenue, and to create an ecosystem. And they just needed a partner. And I think the problem is most MSOs would look at that and say, well, it's on sovereign land, so I can't own it. I'm not interested, but I'll be there for you once you're all set up and running. Well, we're going to be there ahead of time. And if we do our job right, we'll continue to be a partner with them for years to come. Our contract's for 9 years. We will not only build out the facility, we will train the Shinnecock on how to run it. So it'll start with us probably in some of the more senior positions trying to help run and educate. But we fully expect before that contract's out to have Shinnecock managing that facility. I mean, the general manager, Sinead Bullock, she's Shinnecock born and raised. So she will be managing that. They will own the property. There's no call option that for us that we're going to suddenly own something 2 or 3 years down the road. And when I look to, Doug, you talked about New Jersey. When I look to New Jersey and some of the social equity licenses there, we're getting questions all the time about, hey, I'm a social equity, I'm a license holder, I just need to hold it for a certain period of time, and we can do the 5149, and you can buy me out in 2 years. Well, that's not social equity. That's just kind of transfer of wealth for a few people. We're trying to build something more long range because, look, I think there's enough money in this for all of us. We don't need to be greedy, right? Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. And I think there's been some hoggish behavior, over the years.
I
100% agree. Sorry, Jimmy, to cut you off, but I
No.
always
I think it's fun. I love what you say when greedy, power, greed, and money have corrupted a lot of institutions in our world over the years. And I really hope that this one isn't going to go the same way. And I do think it's people like you and shows like this that are open and can talk about these things. That's what we're working towards, not legalization, normalization. That's what this industry has to focus on, not legalization, normalization, educating those out there that might be curious who want to learn about what the history of this plant is and the role that it's played, not just to the indigenous people, the Native Americans, but also, you know, black people were arrested 3.5 more times than white people, and we use it the same. It has been filled with injustice, and I'd really like to see that change. Are you confident that the industry is working together enough on this, Gary?
I think the building blocks are there. Certainly, I've seen more of a groundswell of support. In the beginning, I think there was probably a little too much lip service. You saw a lot of companies talking about working to help expunge people's records and trying to lean into Last Prisoner Project. But then if you took a look at their payroll, how many people did they hire that had nonviolent cannabis offenses? And you'd find out that no one, in the very beginning, very few people were hired for that way. I think more and more now, the light's being shown, and we have some really strong social equity folks stepping forward who are looking to actually create businesses, right? Not just trade on being a social equity applicant. I think that's what's key. I think we've been very fortunate with the brand partners that we have, that we've come across female-owned, female-run businesses. We've come across minority-owned businesses, and, folks who have a dynamic story, a great architecture, and they want to be in this for the long haul. So, as I've met people along the way, certainly with what we've done, we have a lot of folks come up to us, say, how can we get involved? How can we, be on your short list of people to partner with? And the first question I always ask is, well, what do you want to do, right? If you have a brand and you're telling me you're a social equity applicant, what's the hook on your brand? What do you want to be? And for those that just sit there and say, well, I want to be everything. It's like, okay, well, that's not going to work. Tell me what it is that makes you different. Now, maybe it is you're a social equity applicant. Okay, it's worth having a conversation, but you've got to have the same business acumen. And I think, the more of us that can step forward and try to provide that, I think in the early days of Tilt, we were doing career fairs where we taught people how to turn a passion for the plant into a career, how to interview, how to fill out job applications, how to write a resume, things like that. So I feel like there's more and more groundswell. I feel like it's turning into more than just the showpieces and people writing checks. I think the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see how many people step forward and take real risk. I think we're probably a little bit out in front on that one. I was pleasantly surprised when I pitched the idea to our board, and they said, sure, it's okay, let's put it at risk. And we're certainly not swimming in cash. That $18 million doesn't mean anything to us. But I think that's what it's going to take.
Hey, Gary, with your tribal partnership, did you ever have any unique product offering conversations around blunts or anything that they're able to offer that the other markets can't?
We didn't get to that level because what I didn't want to end up with was a situation where it only worked on sovereign land, right? Because I think one of the things that made the Shinnecock unique was they took a look at the New York State regulations and they see the wholesale play. And certainly if you take a look at the way the regs are playing out in New York State, it's going to be a wholesale play. You take a look at the adult use and how they're trying to keep the affiliation with large MSOs off the table. Well, how are those people going to get product if they're not affiliated? Wholesale. So, they always wanted to make sure that their regs, while they could do whatever they want on their sovereign land, they tried to mimic New York State regs where possible. We haven't really gotten into the individual items. We've been working with their Cannabis Control Commission that they have there to try to help them understand how they might want to write some of the licensing and the regs, borrowing from our Massachusetts and Pennsylvania and Ohio experiences. We haven't really gotten to the product level yet. But I think it's a matter of time before we get to that level. But I think there's a desire to make sure you don't just do something that can only be done on sovereign land, because as great as that might be, you're talking about 1 or 2 stores. And
Vegas seems to be getting away with it with their lounge at Nuwu. They've got a cannabis lounge that they were able to open up before. But I'm wondering if what you're seeing out in the markets with some of the consolidation, distressed markets, if that's creating an opportunity internationally or domestically.
Ooh, a couple of questions there. Look, there are opportunities with consolidation in general. We mentioned a little earlier, there's some companies out there that shouldn't be publicly traded companies. But it doesn't mean that there's not a reason for their business to have existed in the first place. So I think there's some opportunities there for some of the smaller players to really come together. Internationally, I do think that our friends across the sea are learning much better. If you take a look, Canada kind of started the wave and they got some things right and more things wrong. We certainly learned from that, and we're still working through our pile of what's right and what's wrong. But it feels like, over in the EU, Germany is stepping forward as a leader there. I think the medical play is what's going to make that one a little bit more interesting, and how that all pans out. But there are definitely opportunities in Europe. I think there was a point where it seemed like it was too far away, that we still had to get our U.S. house in order. it feels like that's starting to pick up steam. And if you think about it, each successive cannabis market has come along faster than the one that preceded it, right? So I think Canada took a while, US sort of accelerated. If it wasn't for our government holding us back, we would have been light years ahead. And now I think what we're seeing overseas is they're starting to move even faster.
Are you guys getting a fair shake in the media?
Us personally?
Yeah, and in
Or
the
just-
industry in general.
You know, I think I have no complaints with how we're covered. You know, I think, you know, till like I said, has a second act. You know, there are some skeletons in that closet from 2018, 2019. You know, some moments where the company didn't shroud itself in glory. I think we've got so many people on our team. So I have kind of an IR background, you know, capital markets and IR. We have so many people on our staff who have done some form of IR and communications that we felt the best strategy is be transparent and be honest. Don't sit there and say how everything's great. If there's really a problem, just acknowledge the problem, the source of the problem, and what you're going to do to fix it, and then make sure you follow through on it. And I think since we really announced our new strategy, it's been somewhat cautious optimism. Like, what are these guys talking about? CPG in this space, they don't know what they're doing. And little by little, now you see how many people are talking about CPG and talking about brands and all of that. So I feel comfortable with how we've been treated. The industry, you know, I think it's funny. You know, there's some folks who always just want to go out of their way to tell you how bad marijuana is, you know, and you'll always find a study, and you can always figure out a way to use data to prove a point, no matter which side of the argument you're on. You know, I think it's getting harder and harder for people to ignore the fact that outside of the pure recreational use, there are medicinal aspects. There are pieces to cannabis in general that allows it to be a part of your everyday life without it being so episodic. I've never heard anybody say, man, my elbow hurts, I need 2 shots of Jack and I'll feel better. You know, but I will go out and get a CBD cream or THC cream, and I'll put that on there, and suddenly I do feel better. I think it's being taken more seriously. There's still some folks who I think are knuckleheads out there and how they cover it, but it feels like it's getting more and more mainstream. And I've said before, if you discovered this plant today, you'd have 3 aisles in Whole Foods dedicated to it in some way, shape, or form.
Right. I agree 100% with you, Gary. Man, I'll tell you what, I'd love to talk more with you, but we have another CEO waiting in the green room, as I guess they say. That's Sundee Seefried from Safe Harbor Financial. I bet you know her. I'm just going to go on the limb. Have you ever met her? You've met her. Yeah.
I may have heard of her.
All right.
So, you can't say anything in this industry. It's not like, oh my God, they're doing work with them. It's like, good Lord, you know. So,
I like a lot of the things that you had to say, and I'm feeling far more encouraged about it now than before. And I look forward to a good relationship with you guys. I mean, Tilt Holdings was the sponsor of New England Cannabis Convention in 2019 at the Heinz Auditorium in Boston. By any chance, were you there?
I was not. So let's see. I was probably at Columbia Care at that time. So that's how I got into cannabis originally. I joined Columbia Care.
They were there too. That being said, we live streamed 3 days from the floor of that convention. And that was kind of our coming out party into the industry. In fact, we were named another company. We're Cannabis Multimedia Network, which is way too long for a URL. So Jason Wolf, who used to be the program director of WEEI, went to BU, WEEI, right? He named us Pro Cannabis Media, and we've kept that ever since the spring of 2019. And here we've survived. Now we're waiting to thrive, Gary. So I'm going to take a lot of the things you said to heart and implement as many as we possibly can. But we're going to take a break because we are a little late. We usually break at 4:20 for obvious reasons. We usually play Shanty by Jonathan Edwards. Have you ever heard that song by any chance? Does that ring a bell at all? Because he was big in Jonathan Edwards was a New Hampshire, you know.
Yes, Jonathan Edwards, sure. And I'm trying to remember Jonathan Edwards and he used to play the Paradise all the time.
Right. Well, and I think I saw him in concert at Walter Brown at the gym at BU in the late 70s, probably. When I was a tough. So just saying, it's one of my favorite songs, and it is our version of the Waldos who created 420. And that's why we play it. So Gary Santo, thank you so much for taking the time on a Friday afternoon to join us. I look forward to talking with you in the future. And we're going to continue with more Business of Cannabis talk after this. Don't go away.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, you know, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm going to sit down in my rented car. I'm going to jam it into drive. Going to head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
All right, welcome back to the second half hour of our 2-hour really live Green Rush show. We call it because it's the business of cannabis talk show on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and sometime host of this program. And of course, we again want to thank Gary Santo from Tilt Holdings for joining us for that half hour. It was fantastic to talk to him. And I love the fact that he went to Boston University, but I'll leave that alone. That being said, we're so happy to have another CEO join us for this half-hour panel, if you will, half-hour discussion. Her name is Sundee Seefried, and I said it right, Sundee?
Absolutely.
All right. Tell us about Safe Harbor Financial. I mean, I understand you're a lender to cannabis businesses, and we all know how capital is dictating a lot of the launch of the cannabis industry.
Sure. Well, we started actually Safe Harbor Financial way back in 2015, and we really started with depository services because that was the real need of the industry at that point in time. We never pushed ourselves faster than the regulators because we wanted to make sure that we had continuity for all of our businesses, and the regulators were very comfortable. And so we launched a lending program in late 2021, and very slowly and methodically, because we just, coming from that banking background, that's what we do. Everything's slow in banking, if you know what I mean.
Well, add cannabis to that, and you're really at dog years. I mean, come on, that's not fair.
That's true.
Sorry.
But I have to say that, our team has, and we just did the acquisition. So we were at well over 50 years of cannabis related experience in the senior team. So that really lends itself well to understanding these businesses as we want to make loans to them. So we are really focused on senior secured debt at this point in time. And there's a lot of good real estate opportunities out there. While most of the market is offering somewhere, specialty lenders between 18 and 36% on an annual basis, we're between, we just did a quote for 8%, 8 and 13%. So we're trying to normalize it. And while, we go through the normal credit analysis that a financial institution would, not doing these projection loans because we want to make sure that we're working with financial institutions and they feel very comfortable with what we're doing.
Right. Josh, go ahead. Since you've already interviewed Sundee, I'm sure you have a favorite question you want to ask her or topic to talk about. Look at him checking his notes.
I was going to ask a follow-up about that. Sundee, you mentioned about the senior secured debt issuances that you're offering right now. And I noticed that I think right now, 86% or more of all funding is through debt issuances, and it's at an all-time high. Why is that?
Well, in my opinion, there were a lot of situations where cannabis companies were taken advantage of in the last 10 years.
Yep.
And they gave up a lot of equity. And I think it was painful for them. And I think the other fact is the market's pretty tight at this point in time to go out there and raise equity. But I really think it's because they don't want to give up ownership. We're getting a whole nother group of professionals coming into the cannabis industry. And I think they realize debt's the way to go because you can manage that and own the company. So that's my opinion as to why debt is moving ahead. And it's becoming more available. Everybody wants a lending relationship out there. That's what financial institutions have been waiting for. The problem is they jump in on the lending part, but they don't understand the companies and they don't understand the cash flow and they don't understand what the differences are in cannabis and normal business. So that's where I'm seeing people actually fall down or make mistakes and exit the business once they get into it.
Mm-hmm. Now I have a question. Do you have to work with any major federal banking system, like any companies, or do you do everything in-house as Safe Harbor Financial and you don't even have to work with the other bank institutions for any kind of lending?
Well, it goes both ways. So first of all, yes, on the balance sheet of financial institutions right now, that's what gives us our capital advantage because we get a very low capital against our deposits. The cost of capital. So really low, which makes it very advantageous to us, and the bank gets different servicing fees from us. So that is definitely a positive to work with the financial institution against our deposits. The other way of doing that is getting the line of credit from a financial institution or wherever we get it. And again, what they want all of our deposits. They want to see what our deposits are, and then they'll give us a line of credit based upon those average deposits, which average over 200 million at this point in time. And that allows us then take control of that line of credit rather than worry about the balance sheet of the bank. But that does become a little more expensive, but not that much, because again, we're in a really unique position where we've been the front runners for 8 years and they're trusting us. We've been through 16 federal and state exams. They know that we know the money, and they also know that we're going at it from a very secure perspective in terms of what we're underwriting. And that's the kind of lending banks want to do naturally. So that's the area we're trying to stay in. Nothing too risky. It doesn't mean we don't do something where we'll include the assets of licenses or we'll include the assets of equipment. It just means we lead with real estate to make it really secure and get the comfort of our financial institutions.
What are we talking about in terms of that premium for marijuana related businesses? Because if people are going to go after a different money transmitting service, it's only going to be because the fees that are being charged are probably too much. Otherwise, they're going to want the affiliation and ease and convenience and everything else that a traditional bank is offering. So what is that premium? Is it substantial? You said it's not that much. What is it these days?
Oh, I'd say it's in our case, like it's 3 to 6% in terms of interest rate. But again, it really depends. Now, if we're going on the high end up to that 13%, which is probably the highest one we made, we're looking at construction loan, right? We're looking at something that's got a little more risk to it. We're looking at the fact that we got to be out there on site, making sure things are being constructed in the timely manner, and they're going to be able to get to that cash flow they've promised. So I would say that the premium is really based upon the type of loan we're making. But like I said, this last one we quoted at 8%, pure real estate, all under 50% LTV, solid real estate. But there's differences. Like when we went through NASDAQ to get listed, we had to make certain concessions that said, this is how we're going to treat cannabis loans. The big issue there is, think about this. If we have a loan out to a cannabis shop and they default any way, shape, or form, we can't touch that product. So then we have to hire an intermediary. Now that's going to be expensive for us to get somebody in between. So there are other things we have to do. The other thing is on cannabis, you have to interface with the client much more frequently. You don't just do an annual. You're always constantly watching whether they're getting licenses, whether there are violations of those licenses. It's more regulated at the state level. Therefore, we have to be more alert about everything that's going on in that company.
So there was a KYC or know your customer in the traditional world. It sounds like you have a lot more scrutiny and due diligence. The FTX issue, there's a lot of that crypto people who thought people were doing their due diligence and they really weren't. They're just riding on the backs. And I've seen it in the cannabis industry too, with angel investors who just don't. There's FOMO everywhere and they just assume everyone else has already done it. But you guys are actually doing a lot of the scrupulous work for due diligence and staying on top of it. That's part of that management fee, I'm assuming.
Yes, so you'll pay a premium. You talk about servicing fees, usually run about 50 basis points, and we probably somewhere 80 basis points, right? Because we not only have to watch the loan in the company, we have to know that the money we're taking in is solid and validated, good funds, that they're not illicit coming into the system. So every dollar we move into the system has to be monitored and validated, because we know there's a black market out there operating in plain sight. And that money is going to find its way into the system somehow if we're not monitoring. And these are the things that keep our regulators comfortable. So we're constantly working with the bank, as you asked, we're working with the financial institution. We can't afford to get them in trouble. So we're still operating at the standard the regulators have comfort and expect the bank to operate.
And I'm going out on a limb thinking you're hoping for that passing of that Safe Banking Act in the Senate, and after passing 7 times in the House, at some point we're going to get rid of 280E, right?
This is my opportunity to give you my opinion, right?
I want opinions. It's a talk show, okay?
I think, isn't that funny how that came out right there at the midterms, right? And we're going to throw the industry a bone. Wouldn't surprise me if they get all the way through this process and they move it from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2. And that does not alleviate 280E, but it sure does throw the industry a bone, doesn't it? I think when you're really going to see action is at the next election cycle. When you talk about 280E and moving that away, you have so many agencies involved here, but let's first start fighting with the IRS, who's collecting a lot of money and laying people off. They're really not going to want to give up that income. Then if you want to go to straight legalization, right, 8 years trying to pass safe banking, and tomorrow we're going legal. I mean, people, that's great hope, but it's kind of a dream, because it isn't just Congress. It isn't just the Senate. They have to deal with the DOJ, the DEA, FinCEN. All of those agencies are going to push back because their job is to fight crime. And they see the black market sitting right in front of the legal market. And until they can really sort through, because there's still a lack of trust. I think anybody in cannabis knows education is key, right? And until you educate somebody over and over again, they're not going to gain any comfort with dealing with the industry. And I think that's where our federal agencies are now.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the things that has been interesting to watch here in Massachusetts is the market. It gets announced, it starts, and it kind of starts flourishing, and the price is way up here, and then reality hits, and 254 dispensaries later, and that price is coming down. I mean, it's truly an economic lesson if you watch exactly what's going on, but it's the legacy market that seems to be flourishing during the legal rollout of the industry. Is that a concern?
I really like the term legacy market.
Yes, I like it too. I spent a lot of time in it back in the day, let's just say, you know.
Even in psilocybin, because I've been really taking that on, they don't use black market anymore. They don't use illicit. They use the underground, right? The underground market. So, yeah, I think the problem is that the taxation level on cannabis industry is so high that it is cheaper to buy it from the black market. But I was thinking about this the other day. What they have to do is convince the consumer at this point in time that they want the good, clean cannabis. You don't know what you're getting out of that legacy market, right? It's kind of like going back on that war on drugs where they put those commercials out there. I think states have to realize if they want their legal markets to succeed, they're going to have to get behind why they want them to succeed. And the tax benefit to the state is huge. They can afford to put a little money into supporting the industry, I think.
Oh, I'd love to see that, because there's a lot of tax money that's been out there, and I might say here in Massachusetts there was a little misappropriation of some of those funds in one city in particular where the entire revolution started. In case you don't know, it was Boston. Anyway, let's move on. Doug, you got something for Sundee? I don't want to hog this.
I was actually going to ask because I realized that you acquired Abaca, the technology company. Yeah, I had no idea. I was doing a little research and I noticed that, and I was familiar with that company, and I was like, oh wow, that's quite impressive, because they're quite an impressive technology company in the cannabis space. So how, with that acquisition, does it help the financial side?
Well, yeah. So a couple things there. First of all, what they bring to the table is they're coming from that technology perspective. And I'm coming from the banking perspective, right? And so they have a piece of technology that's really going to help us scale our business. So it was really essential when you're going out to the investors and talking about how you're going to scale the business, you got to finish the model first. So that was why they were our first acquisition. They brought that to the table. They know how to deal with the banks, though, too. Make no mistake, they've been dealing with banks all this time, too. But, you know, the industry is small. Just like, you know, cannabis industry is small, things get around. We have actually worked with these other service providers for years. So we actually knew how to sort out some of the real true cultures who want to serve the industry, who want to do it right, who have been doing it right, from those who may be flying by the seat of their pants, always taking investor monies. Abaca was a good, solid company. They really bootstrapped it. They really focused on compliance and brought technology to the forefront. We, of course, focused on compliance at the back end of banking, even though our software now, between the two of us, we have very complementary softwares between our banking compliance software that we built, proprietary, and then their fintech platform. So that's where that's going to work. Now, we all know integration takes time, energy, time. Did I say energy? I'm not getting any younger here.
And a whole lot of time.
Welcome to the club.
But, you know, I think once we get through the integration, which is, you know, we're really starting that at this point in time now that the announcement's been made, you know, combining the books, looking at staffing, optimizing our position. What I think you're going to see is us grow into that position. We are seeing other financial institutions exit the business and want to, sell their portfolios because the regulator pressure is too difficult, or we're having people approach us because they're saying, now that you're on the NASDAQ, now that you're starting acquisitions, we don't necessarily want to compete. How do we work together? So I see a lot of consolidation opportunity happening for us, and then we'll be able to grow into some of the inefficiencies we may have right now because of the combination. So I'm always looking at job security for employees. It's really important to me. So now I've got to go out there and work for it, don't I?
That's a beautiful acquisition, though. I have to say, it's I can see why the two companies would merge together completely, and it'll be a powerhouse.
We're gonna hope. We're gonna try. Do our best.
Well, best of luck.
Thank you.
Josh, you got something? I got something, but I want to give you guys a chance to talk to somebody.
Well, I guess with that technology, is it still going to require regulators to give the okay for debit and credit cards? That's going to be the Safe Banking Act essentially. But are you guys prepared for when that happens?
Yeah, I guess it's my opinion based upon the years with with discussions we've had with MasterCard and Visa and major credit cards. I don't see safe banking doing it. I think it's going to take full legalization to start putting that money through the networks. That's my opinion, and you already know what I think about full legalization. That's going to be a while, but I do think it's imminent. It's down the road. It's just a matter of time. The fact is, safe banking doesn't take away what we consider the elephant in the room, and that's bank secrecy. Safe banking just says, I'm not going to prosecute you, Abaca or Safe Harbor, because of the fact you're processing cannabis funds and moving them into the system. That's what it takes away. It also may take away and add the fact that we won't be excluded. Right now, it's very difficult in the cannabis world to get insurance coverage without cannabis exclusion, right? So once we get safe banking, they're going to start to see this is okay to start to insure. And some of the insurers I've worked with over the years started trying to get into that early, which I give them a lot of credit for being pioneers. And even the Federal Reserve, there are some Federal Reserves that don't want to openly take cannabis. In the Federal Reserve system, to put money into the system, it's a don't ask, don't tell. If I go to the Federal Reserve and say, I want to put cannabis money through the Federal Reserve, they're going to say no, and I'm going to shut your entire financial institution down from accessing the Federal Reserve because it's illegal and you're doing something illegal. So we've had this happen with some financial institutions. Don't ask, don't tell. But I can tell you that every Federal Reserve that we deal with knows we're processing cannabis. We just don't talk about it. It's a very interesting situation, but I was afraid of that right from the beginning, that Partner Colorado would be shut down and the whole membership would not have access to the financial system. So like 3 months in, April 2015, I sat in front of Esther George, the president of the Kansas City Federal Reserve, and I said, we're banking cannabis. We're running cannabis money through the system. It was one of those things, if you don't want me doing this, shut me down early, because I don't want the cannabis industry depending on me and then me not being reliable and getting too far into this, right? Transparency has its benefit. Yeah. And she actually came up to me after the session and she thanked me for making Colorado safer and getting that money accounted for, so that she knew I was running valid, legal money from legitimate businesses through the Federal Reserve.
There you go. It takes a woman. I keep saying that. Okay. I keep saying that. All right.
You tell my husband.
By the way, I'll be happy to talk to your husband about that too. He knows it already, though. I'm going to go into lips. He knows it. That being, Sundee, I do want to ask you about an interview Boris Johnson had, the CEO of Curaleaf, at MJ BizCon, and he's espousing that the cannabis industry eventually will go to look just like big tobacco or big alcohol. Do you share that vision?
Only in a disappointed way, if so. We started way back in 2015. I got to know all the mom and pops. I got to know the little shops, then we saw phase 2 come in and they started selling to these larger multi-state operators or single state operators with a lot of shops, and consolidation happened. But who could blame them? I knew they were tired. They were fighting an uphill battle that was just wearing everybody out. I get it. Like I said, I'm not getting any younger. I get it. But, I hope not. I see the attempt to do that. What's really going to scare me is when and if we see the pharmaceuticals come into it and take control of the product. Then what happens to it at that point in time? Maybe they'd rather sell something else instead of cannabis. That would make me nervous. So I'm watching these waves come through, and I'm hoping the boutique shops continue to exist. But right now we're seeing the problem. If you're not vertically integrated, it's getting really difficult. You don't have control of the product, the supply line, and everything else.
Wow. Interesting. Hey, Sundee, I really appreciate you taking some time today and joining us on a Friday afternoon. As you can tell, I have a philosophy where I like to surround myself with smart, beautiful women. And and listen to them, by the way, not just surround yourself, but actually listen to their guidance and their wisdom and their insight, because I really think the old white man has screwed up this country, but good, over the last 100 years in so many ways. And I think it's time that the men in this country understand it's time to give equal opportunities to females. And in the cannabis industry, you see a lot of that, don't you? Not as much as you'd like, I bet.
No, well, I think it's always difficult. I'm in the finance world, so let's face it.
Right.
Finance is a man's world completely, but I just bulldoze my way through.
Good tactic. I like that. We'll leave it at that. Sundee, thank you so much for joining us here on Green Rush Live. We are going to take a break, and in this break, there is a promotional video that I put together for our friends at ArcView. They're running another investment conference in Miami next week that we will not be at. However, I did tell them I'd be happy to promote it on our show. And this shows you some of the highlights of their event in New York City that I was at and really enjoyed. And I have a very strong affection for the ArcView group just because of the history of it with Steve and Troy, and now Jeff and Gene are running the thing there. And so sit back. It's not that long, but enjoy, and we'll have more of Green Rush Live after this. Don't go away.
And if we're listening really carefully, which we have to do because she's a plant, right? She talks in poetry and metaphor and aroma. She's also saying to us, I came to you to help you spread freedom and prosperity more broadly. Let us listen to the plant.
Now, why are you here? Especially the new people. You're here because you know something that we have been celebrating for many years. And that's the fact that we are marching toward $100 billion industry.
When I introduce ArcView and tell our story, after speaking to its roots in advocacy and social justice, I tell folks that between 2010 and 2019, some $350 million has found its way to over 250 companies at ArcView events.
All the venture funds that I've met so far, we're all very friendly with one another. Everyone needs to help each other out on their deals.
We want to go deep into legacy operators or folks that have a voice in social equity. Inclusivity is really part of our mandate. We are a ESG and impact-oriented fund.
Today, in this whole conference, it's just been exciting to see so much more diversity.
So for me, legacy kind of means we've always had this right as Indigenous people. It's given to us for our use, not for legalization or licensing or profit.
I will always feel something. I will always care.
And the winner is, everybody do it, everybody do it. Louder, 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 louder. Roll of life.
feel like the people here actually are doing the thing and they are at the front lines. And so if you want to connect with folks that are really making a difference and also leading the front, I think this was one of the best opportunities that I've had to kind of chat with people.
When it's poverty that made us dealers and users, can't keep your lights on, you can't control your household. How you gonna act when your economics all gone? Instead of complaining, I triple my grind. I sharpen my focus and I start taking what's mine. You can't blame life, y'all. Let's go.
This event rocked. The best, I would say, investor networking event I've had.
I thought this event was fantastic to connect all sorts of people within the cannabis space. I think particularly the WIN network for me did it.
Being a woman, especially a black woman in the space, that I feel like I'm home and present and have an opportunity to succeed forward as a result of this event.
We just having fun, fun, fun. We just having fun.
Rolling, what are we rolling, baby? We rolling some sativa, some indica, what we got?
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weegits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCM TV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways, and they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
All right, welcome back to the third half hour of Green Rush, our really live cannabis business talk show every Friday afternoon here on Pro Cannabis Media. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. A reminder that Weed Talk News, our weekly news show, follows this really live show on a live stream. Man, wasn't it easier when it was just on the air and you could just watch it and see it wherever? Anyway, that's what we're doing now. That's what you can get at. And we're happy that you can actually hang out and watch that news show because first of all, my Washington State correspondent, Josh Kincaid of the Talking Hedge, is a guest host today, and now is becoming a good friend of Pro Cannabis Media. We really appreciate him. And Doug Miller is with us as well from New Jersey. And if you don't know anything about the New Jersey market or the New York market, you should, because those two markets combined will eventually pass California. Okay. And in California there might even be a little, under the radar contest going on. Who's going to sell the most weed in the 4 or 5 year period? That's what I think anyway could happen. I don't know. Doug, you tell me, is it crazy down there in New Jersey?
Yeah.
Are the lines, have they dissipated at the adult use stores that are open?
I mean, they're not all the way around the block right now, but you go before a holiday. Most Fridays, people like to get their Thursdays and Fridays. They're definitely around the corner. They're not all the way down the block, but yeah, it's a very booming industry, and yeah, they keep opening up more dispensaries. As I was saying, they're opening up better dispensaries, not so much the multi-states, and the quality is becoming a little bit better, which is people are starting to enjoy.
Yeah. Hey, Josh, Washington State, a mature state. We've talked about some of the issues there as well. Are you finding after time, it is the craft grower that seems to be the go-to product in the space?
Not right now. What I'm finding out right now is people are just trying to get what they can afford.
Yeah.
I ask the bud tenders every time, like, what's the number one product right now? Why? What are you seeing? Just grilling them, like 30 questions, whatever. But basically what I'm seeing is what's on sale, and the massive amount of traffic that comes is when there's a discount. So that's pretty much why there's not, why 420 is no longer the number one day of the year. There's Green Wednesday, there's Cyber Monday, there's Black Friday, there's all these other days of the year that are way bigger, because people want to just get through the experience with their in-laws, so they're going to the cannabis shop rather than, 420 that doesn't have the same deals. Like, why deal with the lines on a 420 when you have the same deals on a Tuesday or Friday, Saturday? It just doesn't make sense anymore. So I think people are waiting for those deals, and that's really what's driving consumer behavior right now is price. Not only that, but I tried different stuff all the time. And when a $200 ounce is, 140, I'm like, okay, let's try that out. And I try it and I'm like, wow, that's trash. That's just as bad as this $30 ounce I bought in Tacoma last year. It's like, there's no difference. So I'm like, maybe I need to get out of this region because I'm by SeaTac. Maybe it's probably tourist weed, and maybe the better stuff is in another region or something. So it's regional. Right. So how do you find where the deal's at? By the way, if somebody's listening and you're in technology, create a website so I know where the deals are at. I'll drive 20 minutes if there's a good deal on a big fat blunt.
Huh. Interesting. That's and I love ingenuity and entrepreneurship in this industry as well. But the craft grow, think about this for a second. The multi-state operator has multi-state growing verticals all over the country, and they have a ton, literally tons of cannabis versus your favorite person who's out there growing it in their backyard with really good genetics, really good seeds, understands hydroponics, is doing it organically, and he produces better quality product because there's less of it and he can care for it better, right?
I agree, but when you get some of these master growers, and I just think New Jersey is a little behind on that scene. You need some people from out west, California, Colorado, some people like people that have been in the industry for a while, running big warehouse type grows. And yeah, they can tend to that thing and make the buds perfect. I mean, when I travel out west and do the conventions, I love it. I mean, it's so much fun because of the quality is so much better. So yeah, I mean, our black market, honestly, our underground market's better than our dispensaries around here, and that's a
Definitely.
fact. I mean, you can.
We're all in agreement on that one, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's
right?
sad. It's so sad, but it's the truth.
And yet the other thing that I actually think has been a good thing for the industry is if you do happen to partake and go with the legacy market and have that product and you want to get that product tested, most testing labs will take a $50 fee to test your own home grow or wink, wink, wherever you happen to get it from. And I think that's a great service to have as well, just so you can see what the chemical compounds is, the different cannabinoids in there and those terpenes that steer it all. And I really sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I really don't. I just spew out those words. You guys know that. I'm sorry. Hey, Josh,
I was going to say to your point about craft growers coming up, it has to come in a cycle, right? Right now, there's too much price compression on the small growers because of some of the automation. Just got back from MJ BizCon,
right?
And a lot of equipment that's unaffordable. And so when you have 18 people and you're spending $100,000 on labor because you can't afford a $200,000 machine, it doesn't make sense to me. But when you're in the grind and you can't you don't have time to rub two brain cells together to figure that out. Some of those guys are going to fail for obvious reasons when we take a look back, but that creates opportunities. And those opportunities are going to be somebody else found the land. Just to compare like a normal business situation, Burger King spends zero money researching real estate. They wait for McDonald's and then they open up next door and save tens of millions of dollars. So somebody already has an ISO or whatever certification facility they need, and they go out of business. Bam, somebody comes in and out from the ashes rises the phoenix, and we have craft growers. But we can't do that until we have, MSOs completely dominate, create the structure, the pricing, whatever the floor is,
Pay the lobbyists. Yep.
Yeah, I can go and get a $30 rec ounce, but I'll pay $160 if it's consistent in quality, right? There's got to be some happy medium there. I don't want to pay $160. I will go and get $130, but supplement it for something else right now when prices are tough, right? Because gas and everything else is impacting everyone's budget. So I do think that we will get the connoisseur cannabis, but it's not going to be soon enough.
Interesting. And we didn't even get into that. I really wanted to ask the two CEOs we had about home grow and what is the company line on home grow, because I would think that they don't like it and want to legislate it out of the market. But is it really fair to us to tell us what we can and can't grow in our backyards?
Cookies is selling seeds now. So they know that if they have the genetics, you're going to want to buy their brand. So they're cutting into everything, starting out with not even his music, but just branding and then marketing, and then everything else comes second. Unfortunately, quality too, from my experience.
Yeah.
But people love it and they keep coming back. They don't care how dry and nasty that $50 blunt was.
No, they do. They have been doing it. He's crushing it with the branding and the marketing. I totally agree with you. I haven't tried the product, so I'm not sure, but I haven't heard good things like you're saying. So I'll take that. And but yeah, they're kill. But I do agree too with the genetics. I say it all the time because I think a lot of the homegrown genetic companies and the better genetics are going to do really well coming up because people are going to get into the growing scene. That's why I was saying like Viva Sun and companies like that are just bigger with the tents and the lights and have everything and make it simple. I mean, you can just buy a whole grow kit for very cheap. And
Well,
it's not like the lighting system like back in the day that's going to run your electric up like crazy. I mean, you can have a tent running all day with the fans and everything, and you don't even know. And yeah, I think the growing is going to become a much bigger scene.
And
if not for anything else, it's got to be for the consistency, because you could go into these stores and you can't go back and get your particular cultivar, even if you wanted it. And so I think for that reason, if nothing else, people will grow. You want Blue Dream from, 2015, or you want that, legacy strain, whatever it is, White Widow, whatever. A lot of times you can't get what you want. I talked to a guy yesterday who was growing, Seattle Super Chronic strain, and said, "Nah, man, we don't grow that anymore. Actually, everything when we first started is all changed, because the entire industry just kind of changes and flies after the wedding cake or whatever is popular, and kind of a dog chasing its tail rather than going after something that somebody wants consistently and reliably, no matter what." And I think that's one of the biggest detriments to the industry is not offering a reliable product that people can get consistently over and over. I thought Blue Dream was going to be that boring product you could go back, and unfortunately, like you can't go and get something over and over again. It's just not available, and it's kind of annoying.
It's funny you say Blue Dream, because every time I go out west and any dispensary has it, I don't ever look at the percentages because it's nonsense anyway. But all the time, Blue Dream, you pick it up, it's always going to be a solid strain for you. It's going to do whatever you want it to do. It's amazing. And it's funny you say that, because it's like the go-to strain, and it is. It was everywhere for years, and now it's like nowhere. I don't know what happened to it.
Do you guys buy into the doom and gloom that a lot of people are predicting for the industry? A race to the bottom, closures, or is that going to be literally going to be just a phase before the next wave comes in? What's your what the state of the industry right now for both of you guys as you look at it? Josh, what do you think? You were just at MJ BizCon. I mean, I heard it was a great show, packed.
It was. I'm not entirely convinced that MJ BizCon's peak was 2019. I'm going to maybe go again next year and see, but I think maybe that conference may have peaked in 2019, and we will see massive amounts of consolidation and less people going and less booths, even though there was, more people and more booths. It didn't seem like it for various reasons. It was speakers were down a hallway. It was 2 levels. And they were consolidated into their own industry. So all the machines were in one spot, all the insurance was in one spot. So if you didn't care about recruiting or HR, you just skipped them. So a lot of people were playing on their phones. And so it was interesting to see, but you did get to, witness what was happening in the industry and the movements. And it's definitely scaling and automating and normalizing. But I think, like I mentioned with the debt that we have in all of North America, Canada, and the US, that's going to have to fall apart. Constellation Brands wrote off a couple billion, Aurora, Canopy Growth, everybody's writing off money that was invested poorly. And they're kind of coming back to realization of what's a true valuation. How are we going to raise capital? How do we move this business forward? There's very few companies that are doing it in a way that is making financial sense, where there's accretive deals, and not the deals like Hexo and Tilray, in my opinion, not financial advice, but that's not a really good accretive deal. Those are 2 zombies holding each other up. And I think we see too much of that in this industry, to the point where it needs to fall apart in order to take advantage of opportunities. There's too many distressed assets. Let it fail. There's a lot of altruistic individuals not paying themselves. Let it fail. Like, it's not kind to say, but there's too much in the industry. We don't have 400 tomato growers in Washington, but we do producers. So let's get some of the noise out of the way. I bought an ounce last 420 that had spider mites in it. Those guys got to go out of business. There's too much trash in the industry. Like, let's just flush it down and let's let some connoisseurs kind of rise to the top. But right now they're just jockeying for position. And so, yes, there's going to be some doom and gloom, but what comes from that is seriously good stuff.
Okay. Hey, what do you think, Doug?
I think we're going to see some doom and gloom all across the board in the economy in the next year and a half. So And in this industry alone, yes, I totally agree with Josh. It's just so oversaturated. There's so many people in the industry. Everyone thinks that they're in the industry, they're going to make $1 million like the next day. They don't understand. I mean, again, we all go to a lot of the conventions, and you see newer people at these conventions, and I've been going for 7 years now, for a while, and you see the same people in the industry that learn how to pivot and make it, and then you see new people all the time that have high hopes, and you'll never see them again because they just don't understand how much work and time. And I tell everyone, go find out the regulations and the laws in your towns or wherever you want to work. Go to them towns and start talking to people. And no one wants to start there. They just have these ideas. Someone just told me the other day, he wants me to look at as a business plan for a smoke shop. And I'm like, did you find out at that town will even allow you to have a license? And he goes, no. And I go, what do I read your business plan for? Like, it's a waste of my time. Well, you go and find out first before you waste anyone's time. And they just don't understand this sense of business and how to run things, and they jump into things. And like you said, Josh, there's 1 million people and it's just completely flooded, and there's a lot of people making bad decisions because they just don't understand A, the market space, and B, how to even operate. And it's going to be a doom and gloom because you're seeing it right now. People are being forced back to work because prices are high, and people tried to they stretched out that whole COVID relief and everything else and not working for as long as possible. And now it's catching up to people.
Yeah. Gary Santos in the last segment mentioned about being a consumer product goods and wanting to move in that direction, but they've got the foundation of the industry and understand being in 37 states and internationally, whereas Tilray had no idea what they were doing. They bragged, Brandon Kennedy bragged about not being in the industry and not needing to, and then trying to just fall in the back of soccer moms who found alternative products. So it's really, really important. And I try to emphasize this anytime I can and throw Tilray under the bus anytime I can, not financial advice. But you have to know the industry. And when people say, oh, this is a consumer product good company, we're just CPG. No, you're not. If you don't understand the culture, you're going to fail in the cannabis industry.
I agree 100%. You have to be in it, know it, and just live it all the time, and not just been in it for not just have gotten into the space in the last year and think you're going to thrive because you're about to own a cannabis company or you started an idea. And that's just the mindset that so many people have. They have cannabis company or industry, and I'm going to be rich, and it's just so far fetched. It's crazy.
What part of the investment community is the most solid right now in the cannabis space? And I'm going to real estate, plant touching, ancillary, manufacturing of the interstate commerce that is going on with cannabis right now. And it is legal to replicate a license based on genetics. So a recipe, not a license, a recipe. What part, if you were somebody with a ton of money, Josh, where would you put it if you wanted to invest in cannabis?
I'd stay away from brands right now, especially if you don't know what you're doing. You have no idea what that intrinsic value is. Where a lot of the money is flowing into is retail and cultivation, and that's more than likely because they're in vertically integrated states. So that's pretty much 80 to 90% of all of the money is going into that. And a couple of deals are going here and there, but majority of all deals is vertical integration in limited licensed states like Arizona and New York.
Right. And where would you put your money, Mr. Doug?
Just the agriculture, real estate side of things, because it's going to get you returns, because everything else is just too scary, to be honest with you. It's just too oversaturated with every product. So how do you really separate yourself? And I own a cannabis company, so I know. It's so oversaturated with everything. It's so hard to distinguish what company is better than the next, or they all just blend together. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely quality companies, and there's definitely companies that just put out product because they have the name recognition and they can put out a lot of product and make a lot of money. And and people will buy both products, but it's just crazy. You can't really distinguish yourself from anybody.
So how do you educate the non-user, but the curious one, about what the plant can do to enhance your life, and do it in a way that doesn't come off as, oh, you're just a stoner, or you just want to use it, or recreate. I even hate the word recreational. Okay. It's adult use. It's a product that needs to be used responsibly, just like alcohol is, and just like everything else in the world is controlled by adults. Some of them aren't very adult either. That being said, how long will it take to reach that normalization, not legalization, but acceptance that it's here? And, I'm only judging on my own home state of Massachusetts, and people are starting to accept that it's not going anywhere, and that these stores aren't evil, and they're not having, lines around the corner every single day, and they have to bring in police detail, and the impact fees have been challenged. Some of them are going away now. That was the 3%, on top of the license fee of the host community agreement that you had to pay here in the state. So it's a big question, and Josh, I don't think you have an answer for it, but how in the world are we going to educate the people that are just curious when it's still an illegal product at the federal level?
The way I attacked it in 2015 was reaching out to anybody who would listen and try to promote an active cannabis lifestyle, because the narrative was an indica lazy, you melt in your couch kind of narrative. So, Sabo Shin was a guest on here a few weeks back with the Vape Exhale. And so he's really good with jujitsu, and so started kind of marketing that way. That was his thing. I've talked to Lofa Tutupu, NFL player. I had an event actually at the Moda Center, the Rose Garden in Portland, with Cliff Robinson, where we had cannabis companies and cannabis on display and everything in a suite, and just trying to be there when Denver played Portland. So it was the Nugs versus Blazers. Blazers Nugs. Nice. So that was kind of to be this thing where we're normalizing it's cannabis companies there, and we're active cannabis lifestyle, and just try to professionalize it. And so that kind of just trying to be professional, trying to be normal, trying to do with sports was the way. Because with Lofa Tutupu, as he mentioned, if he was doing CBD, he'd still be playing with the Seahawks. So I believe CBD is kind of the gateway into that normalization. But if we come up from a standpoint of like active cannabis lifestyle and professional and normalization, I think that's really what's going to get some of those folks on board and say, oh, it's health. It's not high. It's not just this thing for fun, but it's this other purpose as well.
I like that, health not high. I like that. Doug, you like that slogan?
That is a great slogan, health
I
not
like
high.
it. Have you played with that? Is that original?
It just came off the top of my head. I haven't trademarked it yet.
Just like it's a whole
I know what you're doing after this.
Yeah, you should, for sure.
That is great.
It's a good one. You mentioned CBD. Again, it just kind of reflects on how things grow virally in our world now, when the consumer is in charge of creating their own media, their own content, and sending it out there. And to me, one of the biggest issues in our country is the lack of sleep. And the CBN cannabinoid has absolutely helped people get a good night's sleep, including moi. Okay, I'm now using a product that is a CBN dominant gummy, and I'm sleeping through the night, which hasn't happened in many years. So again,
Jimmy, let me tell you a quick story. When I was in Vegas, I took 40 milligrams, because I could take 100 milligrams and forget that I took anything. That's how high my tolerance is.
Yep.
So I ate 40 milligrams, and then I hit the casino floor. I ran into a friend of mine who I wasn't expecting. And then after the conversation, I didn't even get outside. I was going to walk the strip and hang out, just see stuff. This is Monday. This is day one when I just got in. And then after the conversation, I realized, like, whoa, like behind my eyes. It hit behind my eyes because this edible I had from Swift was THC, CBD, CBG, and CBN.
Yeah.
And so just, the entourage effect, especially with that CBN, like it hit me behind the eyes and I was like, whoa, it's only 9 o'clock. I got to go to bed, and I wake up to all these texts like, hey man, it's go time. Let's do the, like all these friends, I got all these texts. I'm like, I was out, just passed out. Didn't even make it out of the floor off the casino.
Well, it can impact you. And especially when you're doing like at a show, you get samples, if you will. And there's a lot of gifting going on in the world of cannabis, and you really don't know. But I still like being able to go into a medical dispensary and know exactly what I'm going to be putting in my body and be in control of it. Okay, not out of control. And that's one of my biggest beefs with a lot of the edibles is you don't know when it's going to hit you and how it's going to hit you.
Or going to a golf tournament and then somebody gives you something and they're like, that was psilocybin. And you're like, whoa, I didn't sign up for this.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. We signed up for another half hour of content and we do have a guest we're expecting. I'm not going to give the name because I never want to set them up for defeat because sometimes things come up and people don't show up on a Friday afternoon. We get that. We're going to take a break and we'll come back on the other side with the final half hour of Green Rush Live. Don't go away.
It's the whole package. Not only is it the exclusion, we talked earlier about how experienced is your rep you're talking with. Do they do it full time? Do they do it 5% of the time? Do they have a dedicated back office? How long they've been doing it? There's a lot of people trying to cash in the insurance. The forefathers, like my company, we've been doing it for 3 years and now they're trying to cash in. That's okay. We like competition, but we know that we're going to come out on top most of the time.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Welcome back to the final half hour of Green Rush Live, our really live business of cannabis talk show that we have here on Pro Cannabis Media every Friday afternoon from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and I'm here basically just to remind people who are watching to like, share, and subscribe to the content, not just on Green Rush Live, but also our weekly news show. I'm so proud of it. Alaina Pinto does a great job as an anchor. She is network quality, people, okay? She came from a network affiliate in Boston, and she's working for us, and we're so happy to have her as part of the team. And Tori Chamberlain, the producer of that show, does a great job, as does Dan French, who stays up all night, Thursday night, putting this show together. And I probably should be giving him kudos for that as well, because he controls this show. He could actually mute me at any time. So think about that power that gives him. All right. Joining us in the last half hour, once again, is Doug Miller and Josh Kincaid. But we're joined by Arshad Lasi from the Nirvana group in Oklahoma. Hello, Arshad. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Tell us about the Nirvana group and where you operate out of and what you guys do.
Sure. We're based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it started off as a smoke shop about 10 years ago that my dad started. And when Oklahoma legalized medical marijuana, I urged my family to take part in it and participate. And in the past 3 years, we've seen a lot of success, and we've been able to grow our business into multiple retail stores, cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and build a suite of cannabis brands.
Fantastic. Congratulations, because those on this show know how much work it takes to accomplish what you guys have done. And Oklahoma has had, an interesting relationship, because pretty much anybody who was in the phone book in Oklahoma was able to get a license, pretty much.
More or less, yeah.
And a lot of them have been sold. A lot of them are not being used. What is the state of the industry in Oklahoma now?
It's definitely extremely competitive. There were a lot of business licenses awarded to a lot of different people. Some people have had immense success, and some people have not been so fortunate, and they've struggled and continue to struggle. But we are, we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We see the possibility of adult use and recreational being passed in the next couple of months. And we're excited that that's going to bring in a new wave of business and revitalize the state. But, it's still a great market, and people are still doing phenomenal things and having lots of success.
Yeah. I'm going to ask Josh this because he's a numbers guy. Josh, when you compare the adult use market sales to the medical sales, there's got to be an X factor in there. How much more value, how much more sales on the adult use side versus just the medical? I'm sure you know this. Am I right?
Yeah, if you look at a chart and you were to compare medical and recreational sales, you would see this bar and then you would see nothing next to it. And that would be the comparison. Medical would be zero because it literally doesn't pay for itself. The cost of the card, like unless you're buying a lot, doesn't actually pay for itself. And so every single adult use state that rolls out, medical sales basically go to nothing. And the entire market has no quote unquote demand because it was never designed for a medical market. The rec came in, or adult use came in and wiped that out.
Yeah. And in New Jersey, Doug, this is going on right now. You're finally opening up adult use stores. I don't know if you have any stats about what is going on in New Jersey or not, but just your overall impression of what you see going on.
Well, it is funny because with the adult use, because our lines are long and medicinal patients do have to get first, like prior. So if you have a medicinal card, you can skip the line and walk right into the dispensary and go right ahead of everybody. So there are people that do still have their medicinal card and use it. I have a medicinal card. I work with the doctor, so I do help them. So, but yeah, it's funny because a lot of people, I know a ton of people that signed up for the medicinal card when it was just medicinal. They're not renewing their cards now. They're going adult use.
Quick stat I can tell you. In Massachusetts, just so you know, the governor was one of the few governors in this state to actually shut down the adult use market in Massachusetts when the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the pandemic, it's not over. It's just we're dealing with it better now. That being said, I'm pretty sure that there was a spike in medical card use during the pandemic. I think 170,000 patients, and now it's down to about 92,000 in Massachusetts. And yet anybody who uses this product is really using it medicinally. Arshad, when you're looking at your books and you're projecting the difference between where you guys are with the medical program versus where you think you can go with adult use, what's the X factor in that?
Well, we think it's definitely going to, like Oklahoma last year did almost $1 billion in medical sales. Yeah. So we think that within the next 2 to 3 years, we should see at least similar numbers in adult use sales. But we recently got our license in New Mexico, and one thing that's been interesting there is New Mexico's first adult use sales started in April, and every month the state releases the report, and adult use and medical are neck and neck. It's like 51-49 adult use. And I think there's a couple of factors there. I think some states have very few pre-existing condition requirements. The cost of acquiring a medical card is so cheap that it could offset, if you're an avid consumer, a regular consumer, it's part of your lifestyle, then it could offset the tax differences and offers you different milligrams and doses of products. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that entirely fares out here. But we do expect it to massively increase revenue and sales.
How big is, you said you're vertically integrated, how big is your grow?
We do a greenhouse cultivation. We have about 10,000 square feet of greenhouse space.
And any idea what the how many pounds you were able to get through that little greenhouse?
Probably close to 3,000 to 5,000 pounds a month. A year.
I was going to say a month. Wait a second.
Pumping some serious gas into that thing if they're blooming that fast.
Throughout the course of a year. And Oklahoma has such a massive availability of biomass that I'm sure we could push it and do more, but it's not been needed because we can acquire so much at a very similar cost.
And give me a little help with the Oklahoma market as far as population of that state. How big a state is Oklahoma?
About 4 million people who live in the entire state.
Right.
It's pretty small. Yeah.
Right. For state, I get that. It's always interesting to me because now the numbers guys are looking at canopy space. They're looking at yield. They're able to look at real figures as opposed to projections that were around before the market has happened here in Massachusetts. So I think it's well over my head when it comes to numbers. Josh, you got. I know you'll have a question for Arshad. Go ahead.
Well, let's start with the number of 7,500 licenses in Oklahoma is a tremendous amount. It makes Portland look like they have a moratorium or something.
Yeah.
And Oregon has half that, about 3,500 licenses, and they're probably the second most in the nation. So at some point, it sounds like you're going to have a pretty good opportunity for your picking as some of those businesses kind of collapse. But I'm wondering what type of market Oklahoma is. Is it conservative like in Arizona where they're buying vapes a lot, or is it more of an open market like Washington where they're buying a bunch of pre-rolls? What maybe describe to the audience and let us know, what do people go after? What's some of the favorite products that you're seeing that you're shipping and making a lot of?
Well, I think one other number that's really important to note is out of the 4 million people that live here, almost 400,000 have a medical card.
Damn.
So I think 1 in 11 people or 1 in 10 people has access to medical cannabis, right? So it's a very open market. Consumers are, open to trying a lot of new things. And we've seen tremendous amounts of innovation in the past 3 years, things that we don't see in other markets for maybe 5 to 7 years. But 50% of most sales are still flower, but edibles and pre-rolls and extracts and beverages are definitely a growing space and make up a large aspect of our volume.
Has anybody enjoyed the beverages, Doug and Josh? Just an open question. Every time I've tried them, they're about 5 milligrams. That's the limit of a can in Massachusetts. It does nothing.
We sell 100 milligram juice.
Well, that'll help.
It's a single serving, 8 ounces, 100 milligram. We're actually going to have a 250 milligram. So I think that's really what the market is looking for, is a proper high dosed beverage where you don't have to have 6 or 8 cans to feel like you're, getting where you want to go.
Yeah.
I will say though, at MJ BizCon, people would go after some of the, those low dose beverages if the price was right. So if for $3 to $5 at a store, or $5 to $10 at a bar, people will consume 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 of those. If they're at MJ BizCon all night, 4 hours or whatever, they will consume at least 4 of those like water throughout the night. But when I was in Chicago 5 milligrams, I'm not going to touch one of those beverages. But in Washington, 100 milligrams, maybe once a year. I mean, I can't even remember the last time I bought a beverage. I'm still waiting for infused coffee to become a thing. But Ray's lemonade, really popular here locally. But no, nobody really drinks beverages, or at least not a lot.
And it's interesting because one of the quotes I always use, Jason Raposa, who has a company called Good Feels, it's one of the top beverage companies in Massachusetts, has a friend who's an oncologist. You got visited by, I'm guessing it's a dog. Am I right,
I'll mute. Sorry.
No, I don't care. Say hello to the dog. I don't know. It's an open talk show. He said the oncologist is really adamant about increasing the amount of percentage of THC in the beverages for their cancer patients, because this is truly where the application for medicinal benefits should be focused on. Arshad, what's your opinion about how much this kind of thing? I mean, you said you have 100 milligram bottle. That's not an individual dose, though. That's multiple doses, or not?
I think it's dependent on the consumer.
The person. Yeah.
I think there's tons of people out there who maybe that's not even enough. They need a little bit more because they've developed a tolerance or whatever their reason may be. But I see a lot of folks in Oklahoma consume that as a single serving, or maybe 2 servings, but at most 4, but not like 10 milligram servings, right? They're drinking half that bottle or the whole bottle or something of that nature.
Look,
we saw people on Fridays between the hours of 3 and 5 on a Friday consume 30% of all edibles, and majority of those were beverages. So people were wanting to get, really, really high on a Friday night and needing 2 days to recover.
Wow. By the way, I don't call that a hangover. I call it a leftover, because you wake up and you're still high.
I like that.
How is the edibles in Oklahoma? Or do you have access to everything? Because in New Jersey, we only have lozenges, and dispensaries are making other things to get around it, and no one's saying anything. But we're not allowed to have any of the beverages. And I was just wondering, because you're just medicinal out there. We actually have rec, adult use, and medicinal, and we still can't have edibles. So I was just wondering if it's full out gummy bears and everything.
Oh, everything. Gummy bears, gummy worms, the ropes with the little nerd candies on them. And the milligrams are crazy too. We've got up to 4,000, 5,000 milligrams in a chocolate bar.
What?
Yeah. 2,000 milligram bags of gummies. Each little single chew, the circle is 200 milligrams of THC.
That's holy mackerel.
Our friends at Cosmic, they have this really cool thing. It's a peanut butter jelly gummy. So it's a grape flavored gummy with a little bit of peanut butter in it. And they basically squeeze the 2 gummies together, and that's their cooking process. So when you eat it and you bite into it, you get a little, peanut butter surprise. And that gummy has over 100 milligrams of THC in it.
Wow.
Don't judge me, Jimmy, if I want to go and buy a tequila in a plastic bottle. Okay. Like if I want to buy 1,000 milligram bar, that should be my prerogative. And I've got a video on the Talking Heads YouTube of a guy doing that in 2015, eating 1,000 milligram bar and just slowly melting into his seat as time went on.
Look, and I'm not judging. I'm flabbergasted, and I'm amazed and intrigued. I mean, it is what it is. This is where, and again, I love having people like Arshad on, because we get the feel for what it's like in that state. We've heard stories. I mean, I know we all heard stories about Oklahoma, but this is enlightening in many ways. In many ways, Doug. By the way, Doug has a edible product. I'm sure he'd like to share with you at some point.
Sure, absolutely.
Arshad, where do you think the federal reform movement is? What is your opinion about what's going on in Washington, D.C. with safe banking and the active lobbies that are now in the nation's capital looking to make reform at the federal level? Is there hope for that, in your opinion?
We're hopeful that there's hope for that, to say the least. It's definitely, it's great for the industry as a whole. We get to move forward. We get to be more legitimized and, really take cannabis and I've spoken about this before, but take it from this very novelty, unique product that's still being accepted and is becoming part of our lifestyle, culture, and society, and really looking at it as what it's going to become eventually, which is more or less a commodity. And I think that the federal government taking these positions and, slowly shifting towards that is just the fruition of cannabis becoming a commodity over the next maybe 5, 10, 15 years. Whether that's positive or negative, it has its pros and cons, but I think that overall it's good for the industry and it's going to just make it more accessible. And hopefully, along with the access, you also are able to raise the standard and have higher quality products that are really geared for the consumers consuming them.
Right.
And
This is
to
what we're
add
talking-
on to a commodity, I honestly think hemp will be added to the trading and the NASDAQ as a commodity in the next decade or so. I mean, it's used for too many things: clothing, paper, textile. It's just so useful, and I really do think it will be one of them, a commodity that's traded.
What are the factors that need to happen before it gets there, Doug?
Well, it has to become federally legal.
I know that.
And I think once it
Good
becomes
start.
yeah, it'll be a good start. But no, it's already has enough usage, and I think there's enough of it. I think it would be pushed to get onto a NASDAQ to be a trading commodity, just
Yeah, and
because there's so much of it. I mean, it's just grown everywhere. So
Right. And in Europe too. I mean, I had a great interview with our European correspondent, Lex Pelger, earlier this week that again, you've got Ireland now introducing decriminalization in their legislation or their parliament. I just don't know how long, I think everybody said, well, it's going to be legalized. I said, it's not going to be legal for 10 years at the minimum. Okay. And I believe. That being said, the descheduling and decriminalization of it and the opening of the banks still is so important.
Be
Arshad,
careful
have
what you
already
ask
had
for,
issue-
Jimmy. Be careful what you ask for, because when you get that, a lot of these companies will fail. So I wanted to ask Arshad what his plan was in order to be able to pivot to stay relevant when that happens. When you have price compression, when you have regulatory burdens, when you have fierce competition with 7,500 licenses, how are you going to be the last man standing?
So, I mean, I think the biggest importance here is, one, there's the infrastructure aspect. Can you compete, logistically and from a manufacturing and production standpoint to be able to match the prices and have the infrastructure to manage the sales and the distribution. And the other part of it is, do you have a valuable brand? Do you have a unique product? Do you have some sort of connection with the consumers, the legacy consumers and the new wave consumers these are going to people that are going to shape cannabis as a consumer product for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And what they want is what these big companies are going to respond to by creating products. If you have something that they love, that they like, that they relate to, then you have either the option to become a part of, the Unilever or the Pepsi Cola of cannabis, or you sell and you walk away. You make a great chunk of change and you realize you had a good run, and if you're not a $1 billion company, you're not a $1 billion company.
Right. Again, guys, this is why I love these kind of interviews when we talk to different people at different parts of the country and also the world now. One of our favorite themes is the international theme when we get people from other countries. I remember we had a Colombian grower on. I mean, I told him, I said, I probably sampled quite a few tons of your product in my teens and my 20s. Okay. Just saying that. So Doug, I'm going to go back to you just for a second here and go back to the commodities question. Do we have to set a wholesale price on something and then bring it to the market? How enlighten me, please.
Everything's based off of speculation. So whatever they speculate the price will be at that time.
What if they don't know? Look, we've got people that we've elected that are clueless about this product. Now we're going to have somebody else setting the price on it.
And that's how it works. And everything's based off of speculation, and they have market makers, and they make the prices, and that's just how it works. And their people control the market at the end of the day. Someone has to run it. So they'll make a price, they'll stick with it. That's where it'll start on a chart, and it'll just trade from there. And that'll be
Arshad,
that.
what's the one thing in Oklahoma you'd like to see change in the industry?
That's an interesting question. I think that we definitely, it's the analogy that my dad gives me is if you've got a school and you've got a school teacher, you've got one teacher and you can have 30 students or you can have 300 students. And that one teacher can only manage and take care of so many students at a time. So I think what happened here is we had at one time almost 11,000 business licenses, and it becomes very tough for any regulatory agency, especially a new one, to be able to truly enforce it and regulate it and do the things it needs to. And we've seen that shift now. I think the state has realized maybe we overextended and we need to have some changes. So we've got a moratorium and some other things in place, a larger budget, and these protocols that I think is going to help mitigate that. Really what we want to see is the continuation of that and just get more regulatory standards in Oklahoma.
You had mentioned you started with convenience stores and then converted those into cannabis shops. Have you noticed an increase or uptick in robberies when you compare the two businesses that you've had? I'm wondering if cannabis was had the option of using plastic, if that would decrease the robberies we're seeing on the West Coast. So multiple part question, have you seen the difference in robberies, and do you think being cashless would help?
I think being cashless would help a little bit, but I mean, my family's been in the C-store, convenience store, gas station business for a long time, and we have probably been robbed dozens of times. I mean, knock on wood, we've only had 2 instances where one of our stores was broken into on the cannabis side, but in the gas station business, it was every couple of months there was an incident. I remember I was like 4 years old, and my dad had this gas station in Dallas, Texas, and a group of people came in and there was a gun to my head. So I've never experienced anything like that in cannabis, but in the gas station business, it's very normal. So
do you think, because I've been robbed at 420 at a bank when I was a bank manager, I had a gun to my head too. So I know what it feels like. And so I'm skeptical that the cashless is really going to change for that very reason right there. So I don't think it's really about the cash. I think you're gonna get robberies no matter what.
I think it's also like the perception is like people think dispensaries are making tons of money. They're just floating in cash and there's just loose product everywhere. I mean, these are organized businesses. We have cash pickup every day. We've got a vault. We've got a safe. All the product is locked up. There's procedures in place. There's magnetic doors and locks and stuff. It's not easy, but I think it's just that perception of like grab and go. And most of the robberies we see is guys come in, they break the showcase, grab as much as they can, and then they run out the door. We don't see these elaborate overnight robberies or, people coming in armed, telling you to empty the register or open the vault or anything like that. We've seen mostly just these grab and go type things.
Hey, Doug, have you ever had a gun to your head?
Actually, thank goodness, no. I've seen some crazy stuff, but thank God I never had a gun to my head. You guys are quite
It's a
brave.
life, it's a life
That'll change your
experience I
life.
think I'm going to pass on too, guys, but I appreciate your honesty, openness, and transparency on that. Hey, Arshad, if I ever come to either Texas, which I have a friend in Austin area. Okay. But if I ever do go to Oklahoma, I would be fascinated to get a little tour and everything. And I'll definitely keep in touch with you. So
Absolutely.
I don't have any plans, by the way, to go to Oklahoma. I did one of the highlights of my broadcast career was a statewide baseball game at Rosenblatt Stadium in Omaha. And that was not Oklahoma, though. You know what I'm saying, right? Okay. Right, guys, right? Omaha's in Nebraska, isn't it? Which is right next to Oklahoma, right? I mean, I know my map. Up above it, right?
That doesn't sound like you do.
No? Not going to worry about it. Hey, Doug and Josh, thank you guys for hanging out with us on a Friday afternoon. Arshad, great to. If people want to find out about the Nirvana group, I'm guessing Google it, LinkedIn, all that neat stuff.
All that stuff, yeah, definitely.
All right, man. Hey, thank you again. Appreciate it. Well, that's going to wrap up our Green Rush Live, our really live business of cannabis talk show that we do every Friday afternoon here on Pro Cannabis Media. Remember, a reminder, Weed Talk News is coming up after this particular show. And to like, share, and subscribe to all the programs at Pro Cannabis Media, including In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. Will you please? We will see you next week when we do Women in Cannabis, one of my favorite subjects. So remember, it's a whole new world of weed. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, the lame duck session of Congress is upon us, and so are the rumors about the Safe Banking Act and other federal cannabis reforms being introduced this year. Plus, Ireland introduces decriminalization legislation for cannabis. We'll hear from Martin Condon in the Emerald Isles. It's December 1st, opening day for adult use sales in Maryland and Rhode Island licensed dispensaries. Curaleaf is laying off over 200 employees as the economic market correction continues in cannabis. Plus, a new analysis of 1,500 regular cannabis users show that a placebo can be just as effective in dealing with chronic pain as cannabis. Really? Hey, nobody asked me. How about you? We Talk News with Alaina Pinto is next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Weed Talk News. I'm Alaina Pinto. As the president returns from his Thanksgiving holiday on Nantucket, and we wait to see when he'll sign that recent cannabis research bill into law, there are more moving efforts to see some kind of reform when it comes to financing in cannabis. This week, the Independent Community Bankers of America sent a letter to Congress party leaders Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, urging the chamber to consider passing the Safe Banking Act before 2022 is out. 44 affiliated state community banking associations also joined in on the call to Congress. Democratic senators like Chuck Schumer and Cory Booker have previously said that federal cannabis reform has a, quote, good chance of passing during the lame duck session. So we'll have to see if this pressure from financial institutions provides any pull. And meanwhile, there is movement in several countries overseas. Officials in Ireland have introduced a bill to legalize recreational cannabis for personal use. The legislation would modify the country's Misuse of Drug Act, officially allowing adults 18 and older to possess up to 7 grams of cannabis or 2.5 grams of hashish. Martin Condon from Martin's World podcast in Ireland weighs in on what it could mean for that country.
Yeah, well, I suppose the bill got its origins going back to December 2020, when it was first announced that the Cannabis Regulation Bill of 2020 was going to be published. But it didn't get published until only just last week. And it didn't actually meet the initial goals that I wanted to do. It was looking for outright legalization, which would have included legislating for the sale and supply of cannabis. But after a lot of back and forth between the PLA here, which is the Public Law Associates or something like that, these people who help our lawmakers write these policies to make sure it's not conflicting with other policies, such as the Treaty on Narcotics that we have with the UN. So the bill currently that went forward is a decriminalization of cannabis bill. It doesn't allow for the sale and supply, but it will allow for up to 7 grams of cannabis herb and 2.5 grams of cannabis resin in your possession without you being regarded as a criminal.
And Ireland isn't the only country looking to make changes. Poland is also looking to go legal, and Spain may be considering adding medical cannabis access for its people. Our European correspondent, Lex Pelger, has those stories and more.
Hello, I'm Lex Pelger from Whitewell Creations with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. In Spain, the Ministry of Health stated they are moving forward in crafting regulations for medical cannabis. Their focus will be on the quality of the products and to ensure the protection of public health. Most likely, prescriptions will be written by doctors and fulfilled by national pharmacies inside of hospitals. They are also considering a centralized registry of patients. It's interesting to see Spain coming late to the medical cannabis world because they are far ahead recreationally with their tolerance of the cannabis social clubs that occur across that country. In the Netherlands, The Court of Justice of the European Union ruled that the country cannot deport a Russian man who uses medical cannabis when it is not legally available in his home country. This man suffers from a rare blood cancer that causes extreme pain, and so this ruling recognizes the importance of medical cannabis for pain management. The court noted that EU law forbids EU countries from returning non-EU citizens who stay illegally in an EU country if they suffer from a severe illness, and if returning that person to their home country would cause a rapid, significant, and permanent deterioration in their state of health. And in Poland, the drug commissioner announced plans to submit legislation for an adult use cannabis market that might launch by 2024. Poland is already one of the largest medical cannabis markets in Europe, and with their neighbors Germany and Czech moving forward with legalization, it seems likely that they want to keep pace. That's a European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations, reporting for Weed Talk News.
The midterm election brought cannabis legalization for a few states, including Missouri. Medical weed has already been legal there for some time, but how soon will you be able to buy your own green in the Show Me State? Well, Brandon Jones breaks it down in this week's Missouri Report.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven, Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And that's right, medical marijuana has been here in Missouri for about a year and a half now, but just passed on November 8th, they passed Amendment 3 that will actually allow for adult use, recreational use, however you'd like to use it. I prefer adult use cannabis to start. It actually goes into effect December 8th. So we are less than a week away from that actually going into effect. And then as far as when you can actually start to purchase that, that's a little bit up in the air right now. Some people are saying June is when the first state you'll actually be able to start purchasing. Others are saying as soon as each individual facility can pass their certification, then they'd be allowed to actually have access. Another big thing is obviously expungement. So expungement is supposed to happen pretty much immediately with those that are not incarcerated. For anyone that has a non-violent cannabis crime, it is non-DUI, or it was not distributing to minors. Those are the things that are still going to be kept, illegal and not going to allow for expungement. All that expungement is supposed to be done by June, and they are starting with obviously the least complicated cases and working their way all the way up to the most complicated by the end. But they did give themselves a June 8th deadline to get all of that expungement records done. So it's a big crazy time here in Missouri. There are lots of lounges getting ready to start opening, and different things in the culture is really starting to take off. More different brands are getting ready to come into the state, and the ones that are already here are pumping up their cultivation sites and getting ready for the increase in sales. So in short, maybe a little bit faster than June, but everything is going to be going into effect December 8th. So again, I'm Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Stay medicated and educated.
A budding cannabis industry will always have its growing pains, right? And unfortunately for some companies, that's resulting in painful layoffs. The latest being corporate giant Curaleaf. Business Insider confirms the company laid off more than 200 employees ahead of Thanksgiving holiday. And according to Insider, Curaleaf gave a statement saying the cuts were, quote, a part of an effort to control costs and drive efficiencies in the face of economic uncertainties ahead. A spokesperson for Curaleaf would not say which departments the cuts applied to. And Curaleaf CEO Matt Darren also reportedly told Insider the company was in talks with unionized employees at affected locations. And unionization seems to be a theme among corporate cannabis as of late. Some employees of Trulieve are now looking to unionize in the Keystone State. Claudia Post has our Pennsylvania report this week.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. Certain low-income seniors in Pennsylvania will receive financial assistance for their medical cannabis treatment thanks to a newly launched pilot program in the state. The state's Department of Health launched the program to offer a $50 a month stipend in financial assistance to help senior citizens afford the cost of medical marijuana. Because insurance companies, as we all know, don't include the medical marijuana in their prescription coverage, medical marijuana patients are left to pony up for the full cost of their medicine. These payments are the first step toward establishing a third phase for financial assistance programs offered to help low-income medical marijuana patients afford their medicine. Moving on, workers at True Leave Medical Marijuana Dispensary in Pittsburgh's North Shore neighborhood on Monday voted to join the UFCW Local 1776. The UFCW Local 1776 now represents roughly about 600 cannabis workers in Pennsylvania. That's a lot of people. The Pennsylvania medical marijuana market is in upheaval, with smaller companies getting squeezed by falling wholesale prices, while their ranks are thinned by growing consolidation among multi-state operators. The situation has spurred independent operators to call on the state's government for help, and with one company accusing medical marijuana regulators of failing to enforce the rules and allowing a monopolistic control of the state's system. The price drop comes as multi-state operators are gearing up for the prospect of adult use legalization and buying smaller independent marijuana businesses that are struggling and laying off employees in an increasingly crowded market. The dispensaries are having a difficult time if they're not affiliated with a multi-state operator. A large publicly traded MSO can survive a long period of time without being profitable, and a standalone can't. It's virtually impossible to compete with somebody who doesn't have to be profitable in the short run. Okay, that's a wrap from Pennsylvania. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not. From Weed Talk News, have a fabulous week.
A big change coming to the way weed business is done in Maine. This week, the Maine Office of Cannabis Policy sent out a notice informing the industry that regulators will no longer be enforcing residency requirements, which required medical cannabis business owners to be Maine residents. A court ruling in August found the residency requirement to be unconstitutional. And now it looks like regulators will be adhering to that decision. Will it mean a more competitive market or a flood of supply for the state? Only time will tell. In nearby Massachusetts, a first-of-its-kind partnership is coming to the state, and Weed Talk News producer Tori Chamberlain has the details in this week's Bay State Report.
Hey guys, I'm Tori Chamberlain, and here's what's happening in Massachusetts this week. Tilt Holdings, which is a multi-state operating cannabis business that works with several different brands across the country, is introducing and announcing a new partnership that's a pretty exciting one. They're teaming up with the Shinnecock Indian Nation to launch a product brand right here in Massachusetts. The partnership will introduce Little Beach Harvest's ancestral plant medicine to Massachusetts. Now that sounds like a mouthful, but basically we're getting some real representation of Native Americans in cannabis right here in Massachusetts. I think this is super exciting because Tilt Holdings, as you may have remembered from my previous reports, has also teamed up with people like Ricky Williams to bring their brands to the Bay State. And it seems that Tilt Holdings really does have a stake in brands that have not only social equity stakes behind them, but really bring a meaningful story to the cannabis space. So I'm really excited to see the first Native American backed cannabis brand coming to Massachusetts, and I can't wait to try it and let you all know how it is. And speaking of products, the Massachusetts High Times Cup winners were just recently announced. It was a big showing of all kinds of products, flowers, concentrates, solvent and non-solvent, as well as distillate cartridges, non-distillate cartridges, edibles, everything you can think of. The results are in, and it's way too many for me to name, but of note, TreeWorks and Happy Valley took home several awards across multiple categories. So shout out to them and everyone else who participated in the cup. You can check out the results on High Times website and try some of those winning products for yourself. That's what's happening in the Bay State this week. I'm Tori Chamberlain.
President Biden made headlines when he pardoned thousands of people convicted of federal cannabis-related charges. And it wasn't too long after that Oregon Governor Kate Brown took the same stance, pardoning tens of thousands of people convicted of cannabis offenses in her state. Marianne Kursaji has that story and more from Oregon this week.
I'm Marianne from Alibi Cannabis with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Next Wednesday, there is an open forum to discuss the lawsuit filed by Greenlight Law attempting to open the doors to interstate commerce. Join us at the River Pig Saloon next Wednesday. Also, Governor Kate Brown announced that she will issue pardons for low-level marijuana possession convictions. The governor's office reported that the move would encompass 47,000 pardons and affect approximately 45,000 individuals. The action also forgives about $14 million in associated fines and levies. This is great news for those individuals. And lastly, this year's outdoor harvest fell from approximately 5.3 million pounds to 4.1 million pounds, a drop of more than 20%. We will be watching closely to see what this does to the market, competition, and pricing for 2023. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi.
If you live in Michigan, some changes are coming to the way business is done there as well, particularly when it comes to how you pick up your weed and where you live. Here's Michigan Normal Executive Director Rick Thompson with the story.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Well, there'll be no curbside pickup of cannabis in Alpena, according to a judge's decision this week. Alpena has, as a part of its ordinance language, a clause stating, and I quote, all business operations of a facility or establishment must occur indoors. Facilities and establishments may not provide drive-through service, end quote. Neighborhood Provisions, which is an Alpena cannabis retailer, was forced by city officials to stop curbside delivery to 4 parking spaces in their lot. So they sued to challenge the city's ordinance language in court. On Monday, Judge Ed Black ruled in favor of the city, but the judge agrees with Neighborhood Provisions' argument that curbside delivery is allowable for state licensed cannabis companies everywhere it is not forbidden by local law. The judge said, I can't make it make sense. That's not my job. Thanks, Ed. Look for a citizen petition to pop up in Alpena to correct this outdated rule set sometime in 2023. Normal of Michigan is sponsoring a poll question to gauge the temperature of Michigan residents to modify our state's existing medical marijuana law. Normal has a long history of sponsoring poll questions, most notably in the run-up to the state's 2 tries at legalizing cannabis through MI Legalize, one in 2016 and one in 2018. As before, the group is using the Epic MRA company for polling services. The language of the poll question reads, Michigan's Medical Marijuana Act of 2008 regulates the activities of registered medical marijuana patients and or their registered caregivers, including placing limits on the number of marijuana plants they may grow for their own use or for the use of a patient under their care. Based on your own experience or what you may have heard about how the medical marijuana law has worked over the past 14 years, do you think the law should be relaxed to permit greater rights and privileges to patients and caregivers? Should it be changed to place greater restrictions on activities involving medical marijuana? Or do you think the law is working well as it is and should remain unchanged? The 4 options for response are relax the law, change to be more restrictive, remain unchanged, or undecided, refuse to answer. The results of the poll are expected to be published in the 2nd week of December. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
And finally, a new study on the effects of cannabis is making some waves this week. While many cannabis consumers claim to use the plant for pain relief, a group of scientists is potentially challenging that. A study they recently published to the Journal of the American Medical Association suggests cannabis is no better at relieving pain than a placebo. The study looked at the results of randomized controlled trials in which cannabis was compared with a placebo for the treatment of clinical pain. It specifically included studies comparing the change in pain intensity before and after treatment. 20 studies were conducted altogether, involving nearly 1,500 participants. The bottom line, quote, meta-analysis showed that pain was rated as being significantly less intense after treatment with a placebo, with a moderate to large effect depending on each person. Our team also observed no significant difference between cannabis and a placebo for reducing pain. The study hasn't been peer-reviewed, but it did have the hands of several doctors on it. So, could it hold some weight? Of course, having open access to study the plant would allow other institutions to peer-review this study. And we're all waiting, President Biden, but it certainly does open up an interesting conversation about the powers of cannabis and the mind. And the more people that are able to study the plant, the more we'll learn about how it affects us all. After all, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it wisely. That's it for Weed Talk News this week. I'm Alaina Pinto.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weejits filtration system. What? The Weejits.com, Weejits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1,300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weejits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCM TV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weejits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
Which at first I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm an activist, but I have, held a bullhorn on the State House steps. I have frequently testified before the Cannabis Control Commission in the state legislature, and I'm not, shy about criticizing where I see, mistakes being made. So Yeah, I think that's what differentiates me, just an appreciation for the plant. And then also I'm a cannabis entrepreneur myself. I've started businesses, so I've lived that entrepreneurial journey. I know how hard it is. It is absolutely a marathon, not a sprint. So I think that, I'm in the game, not just on the sidelines.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.